Welcome to Running Hot, Action Network's motorsports betting podcast. I'm your host, Nick Giffen, predictive analyst here at Action Network. And joining me, my co-host, Stephen Young of Roto-Grinders, better known as Stevie TPFL. And this week, we're talking bets for the Wurth 400 at Dover Motor Speedway here on Running Hot. Last week, Kyle Busch took the checkered flag after a last lap incident between the two leaders, Bubba Wallace and Ryan Blaney, good buddies, Bubba Wallace and Ryan Blaney. That allowed Kyle Busch to scoot by that duo and take the win. Ryan Blaney still ended up finishing second, but Bubba Wallace, unfortunately for him, hit the wall and finished at the tail end of the lead lap. Rounding out the podium was Chris Buescher, who's continued his solid super speedway form by finishing third. Stevie, I know I talked about my thoughts on Talledega. Kind of a boring race, in my opinion, for Talledega. Could get too wide, occasionally could get three wide, but that third lane just couldn't stick. What'd you think of Talledega?
Yeah, I have mixed emotions because I don't love seeing a million wrecks. So in that aspect, I think it was nice. I hate single file racing, so can I really complain about it being, too wide racing? So, I'm not going to be a hypocrite when it comes to that. The non-passing and it being like a strategy race, has it really changed much in the last 5 years? Like, let's be honest. Like, we see these teams and manufacturers working together and pitting together. And Talladega and Daytona have turned into more of a strategy race because teams are sick of spending millions of dollars when they get back into the shop on Mondays. So, manufacturers are working together because you want Ford wants to win Daytona, Chevy wants to win Daytona, the same for Talladega. So was it boring? Yeah, it wasn't the best. Is that NASCAR's fault with this package, or is it the drivers not really pushing that third line until 30 laps to go? Because they really didn't try it all day, and when they did try it, the last time, depending on who was up front, could move that like third line and we could see some really aggressive pushing. But I think we'll see a different Daytona, but I think two wide racing is what we're going to see at Talladega, Daytona, and Atlanta moving forward because track position just so much more important than it used to be.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And there were times that third lane definitely tried to form, fell apart there. And then there was that one time, a couple guys were able to push Bubba Wallace into the lead. So when you did get some good cars, it was possible, but it certainly seemed like that third line was pretty difficult. But I am all in favor, like I said, like you said, I should say, of not tearing up so many race cars. That's, we love to see good hard racing. I just wish it was good hard racing where we saw, a little bit more passing as well as we've come to know from super speedways, rather than kind of just staying in line for 40 or 50 laps too wide in the case of Talladega here. But it is what it is. And now we move on to Dover. Yes, the Monster Mile Dover Motor Speedway, site of the 1 mile steeply banked concrete track, a really unique track. So Steve, why don't you talk to us about racing at Dover? What's that like?
It's very interesting. You get a lot of rubber put down, and then right when the yellow flag comes up, when the tires are cooler, it picks the rubber right back up, and then you have a different racetrack, like on lap 1 than you do on 15, than you do on 50, than you do on a green flag restart. So it's just such a unique racetrack. I comp it best to Bristol. I think Bristol is like the best comp, but it's still not a perfect comp. It's an idea of like a steep concrete track. It's just one's a half mile, one's a mile, one's in Dover. It's just a punishing racetrack. The drivers talk about the loads on this racetrack, and last year with the new car, we saw a lot of spinning. We saw a lot of stuff they were hard to drive, and it made for a very interesting race. There was a lot of stuff that happened. Kyle Busch had some issues late, and then Denny Hamlin was leading the race, and then race off pit road, his tire fell off. So anything can happen at Dover, and now we're throwing in the mix of potential weather again on Friday and Saturday. Sunday's looking a little bit better, but last year we ran like 60 laps, and then we finished the race on Monday, and it always seems like it's that way when it comes to Dover. Like, it's just bad timing of the year for weather there, but
Yeah.
I don't make the schedule.
Dover and Pocono both seem that way every year. Kind of always have that rain potential in the forecast. One thing I really like about Dover, the drivers, they always talk about how it's like a roller coaster. Like you're going up into the straightaways and down into the turns almost. It's kind of a wild ride there. And you mentioned things happen at Dover. Dover has a pretty high incident rate for ovals. Looking back on the low downforce years at Dover, I took 2019 out because it was a weird high downforce year. And we're not running the low downforce package, but overall, the next gen car is a lower downforce car compared to what things were in 2019 with that 7.5-inch spoiler and lower horsepower, etc. So removing 2019 and just looking at 2016 to present, but removing 2019, the incident rate at Dover is 18% of the major incident rate there. That's on the higher side of tracks. And Dover's always one of those tracks where you could just randomly get a big one. Like they'll just randomly be like a 10 car crash at Dover because it's banked everywhere. Not only is it banked in the turns, it's banked on the straightaway. So everything that hits the outside wall gets swept back across the track, and you'll occasionally just get these random big ones at Dover. So definitely an interesting race. I think it's gonna be a great race to watch. You mentioned last year, I thought that was a really good race. I remember the battle Chastain and Truex had late for about the last 15 or 20 laps. I guess it got settled on the very last lap there with Truex spinning out. But yeah, it's going to be an interesting race. So when trying to evaluate bets and drivers for Dover, what kind of data, what kind of stuff are you looking at?
I mean, I'm looking at this year's speed. I mean, probably the most, but I think you can look back at like Dover history. I know like the new car, we can look at last year, but I think Dover history in general matters. I mean, typically a racetrack like Dover, with it being such a unique racetrack, if you're good here, you're probably good here. If you're bad here, you're bad really bad. I mean, kind of finding the right mix between like who's been good here in the past and who's been fast this year, I think is the best thing. And then, kind of looking at, Bristol, Dover stats combined from last year, I think is something you can do as well. So it's a really interesting, unique racetrack, like you mentioned. And it's just one of those racetracks where like you don't feel great about it going in, but the racing's going to be fun to watch. And, trying to predict it is fun because, I mean, if you get it right, you get it right here and you can make a bunch of money.
Absolutely. You definitely can make a lot of money if you get it right here. So we do have to talk about this. You did mention rain in the forecast. Now, currently I'm looking at Saturday, just Googled Dover weather forecast, and it's supposed to stop right around 11 a.m. Dover time, and qualifying is in that 11 to 12 hour. It starts in that 11 to 12 hours. So we may get practice and qualifying in. We may not. How would rain impact your betting process, whether it's practice and qualifying or the race?
I mean, we're going to talk about it through some of these bets here when we take everyone around the four turns. But I think kind of jumping on some potential early week stuff, and if it does rain out, like Kyle Busch, we're going to talk about him. He's going to start on the pole if it rains out, and like if that happens, he's going to go from like these long shot odds, and he's going to move a bunch. So like guys like Kyle Larson, where me and you are going to talk about him. He's one of our favorites. In our models, he's top 2, top 3, if not the best. So Kyle Larson's going to start like 18th, 19th in that range. And if that's the case, it might move the opposite way a little bit. So I think jumping on early week value on guys that might start further up, and then maybe waiting to bet on guys that start further back, like practice really hasn't affected the books this year or last year. But qualifying has. And if that's going to be the case, I mean, no one's getting practice and it's just going to be unloading with speed. You know who I'm going to put up front when it comes to unloading with speed, and that's the Chevys. That's been the case all season.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's going to be the Chevys. And I'm glad, when you were talking about driver evaluations as well, you mentioned current form, how have you been performing this year? And it's been the Chevys. And you also mentioned Dover history. It's almost like you read my article that I wrote up at Action Network, because those are the 1 and 2, like 1A and 1B things that I'm looking for at Dover. And then like a big distant third is any kind of similar tracks, other steep tracks. I'm not really looking at Nashville, the other concrete track here, aside from Bristol and Dover. That hasn't really shown any predictive ability. So not looking at something like a Nashville. Interestingly enough, another track that comes to mind when I look at Dover that does correlate very well with it is Richmond. And, I think it's probably because of how that track also changes, or at least the tires change, and you can run multiple grooves and stuff because Dover is constantly changing. So I know last year when I hit that Chris Buescher 125-1 at Bristol, I used a lot of Richmond and Dover to analyze for Bristol, and that's what helped me land on Chris Buescher there. So that is our Dover preview. Now it's time to dive into some bets. Once again, we're going to take you around the 4 turns of Dover Motor Speedway. 1 pick from Stevie, 1 pick from myself in each turn before we drive into victory lane. So time to take the green flag and start off our bets as we dive into turn 1. All right, Stevie, what do you have for us as we take the green flag and head off into turn 1?
I mean, speaking of one of your best bets ever, let's talk Chris Buescher. Top 10 plus 140 here. This is one of those early week values that I want to jump on in case qualifying does get rained out. He will start I think 6th if qualifying gets rained out, which gives him a pretty good pit stall. Pit stall definitely matters at a racetrack like Dover. We're going to spend a lot of time on pit road with a lot of spins and, how long this race is in general. So pit road matters. Hey, they just got a bump in pit road too with getting Stenhouse's crew, who's been on fire all year. So, he qualified on the pole at Dover last year and finished 8th. He dominated Bristol all the way from 20th. Steep concrete tracks have always been good for Chris Buescher in the Xfinity series, in the Cup series when he's had good equipment. So I think getting him at plus odds for a top 10 is really good value here. And like I said, if qualifying does get rained out, or even if it doesn't, with how good he was in qualifying last year, I could see this moving to, even or even giving a little juice on this one. So I'm going to jump on this one early this week.
Yeah, for sure. I think both of these RFK cars are set up pretty well here. And that's why I'm, for my turn 1 pick, going to stay within that RFK team. I'm going to go with Chris Buescher's teammate, Brad Keselowski, plus 105 over Ryan Blaney. You can get that at BetMGM. This is a little more of a Blaney fade than anything. This is really a big struggle track for him. We mentioned how track history is so important here at Dover. Well, Blaney has only 2 career top 10s at Dover, and both of those were in the very back half of the top 10, 8th place finishes. Everything else has been outside of the top 10. And then when you also look at Penske this year, in the intermediate package, they've had some pretty big tire wear. Also on the below downforce package. So it's been a little bit of a struggle for Team Penske this year on long run speed. And we mentioned how Dover is going to, constantly be changing. That could potentially hurt Blaney as well. But really, it's the track history here for Blaney that is the big red flag here. Meanwhile, Keselowski, RFK, they seem to find something at the most similar tracks last year. Homestead, another steep track. Bristol, of course, both Buescher and Keselowski did very well. Even Richmond, as I mentioned, they've been doing well. So I'm not too worried about the fact that Keselowski finished 20th at Dover last year, especially given that Chris Buescher ran so well last year. So my model has this almost exactly at a coin flip. It has Keselowski just 49.9% to win this. So I'll take the plus 105 over Ryan Blaney at BetMGM. What do you think of this one?
I think bad luck follows Ryan Blaney, and if he could just put a race together, he would be so good. But Keselowski had some issues here last year. Blaney had some issues, man. They missed on the package big time here last year. And if it wasn't for some pit stops and getting track position, they wouldn't even been sniffing the top 10. So the 26th place finish, he was probably more of a 12th place car last year, kind of right around where Keselowski was. So I think it is a coin flip. So if you're getting plus money on a coin flip, why not take a shot?
There you go. So that is turn 1. And now it is time to roll through to turn 2. All right, Stevie, what do you have for us in turn 2?
We got to go to the man, Kevin Harvick, top 5 here, plus 180. Kevin Harvick's one of my favorite race car drivers at any kind of unique racetrack because, he's just been doing it so long, and he's been doing it at such a high level for so long that anytime we're going to have a race where we're potentially unloading and needing to adjust on the fly, him and Truex are guys that I'm going to bump up a little bit. He has a 6.1 average finish at Dover over the last 10 races, 5 top 5 finishes in the last 8. I think he's finished in the top 10 in all those 8 races. Top 10 in speed at both Bristol and Dover last year. We know how good he is at Bristol and Dover. I mean, Stuart Haas, they've been pretty strong with the short track type of package this season. Does that translate to Dover? We're going to find out this weekend. But yeah, Kevin Harvick, top 5, plus 180. I don't mind. There's some books where you can get him at really good odds to even win this race. I don't hate it. I wouldn't be shocked if he gets a Miles trophy in his last Dover race here.
Yeah, you mentioned that those last 8 races, top 10 in every single one of them, and 5 of the 8 he's finished in the top 5. And if you're getting plus 180, that's a pretty hefty number there. So I really like that pick. I may have to tell you on that one. I need to check my model for that specific bet because I think I'll probably be showing value there as well. So good find. I mean, there's so many bets out there. You can't find every single one every single week. And I know some other people are high on Kevin Harvick as well. Our friend Jim Sonis over at Number Fire, I know his model is very high on Kevin Harvick. So definitely something to take note of if you are a NASCAR bettor, that a lot of the bright minds in this industry are on Kevin Harvick. For my turn 2 pick, I'm just going with the lean here because of the way qualifying may shake out with the rain. I'm going to lean with Daniel Suarez, top 5 at plus 650 at BetMGM. Other books have this at plus 400, plus 550. So BetMGM definitely offering the best price here on Daniel Suarez. And Dover is a great track for Suarez, not counting the year he spent with that absolutely backmarker, no longer existing Gaunt Brothers racing team. Suarez has finished inside the top 14 in every Dover race, and that includes a best finish of 3rd back when he was with Joe Gibbs Racing. His teammate Ross Chastain finished 3rd last year, and Suarez himself, you mentioned how Blaney was probably around a 12th place car. Well, Suarez was around a 10th place car before he had a late spin. I think it was lap 333 to be exact of the 400 laps. So just not enough time to recover. He still recovered up to 14th place, but not enough time to push his way even further forward. So just a really good track here for Daniel Suarez. And obviously the Chevy's Team Trackhouse have been performing very well this year, like they were last year. So I have some thin value here. So that's partly why it's a lean. I have him at 13.8% to finish inside the top 5 compared to 13.3% implied odds. So a 0.5% of value. And since he starts 16th, this may get a little bit better if qualifying gets rained out. Now, I will say if we do get qualifying, he's a pretty good qualifier, so there's a very good chance he starts inside the top 10. So your decision, leaving it up to you on what you want to do here. Right now, I'm just having it as a lean for that top 5.
Yeah, he got some damage early last year, too. I don't remember who he got into. And I mean, that obviously didn't help him. I had him as like a 15th to 18th place car last year at Dover and Bristol. So I mean, getting it at plus 650, I'm not hating it, but if you, I mean, not touching it at 4-1, nowhere. So,
Yeah,
I mean,
not at
finding it
4-1.
and kind of looking around is big.
Yeah, absolutely. You got to look around, and that's why BetMGM right now, they do have the best line, plus 650. Definitely would consider it there, and I wouldn't go much lower than that. So that is turns 1 and 2. Now we're going down that kind of steeply banked back straight for a straightaway off into turn 3. All right, Stevie, take us into turn 3.
I mean, yeah, we got the G's here. So let's use those G's and try to get us a winner this week. Ross Chastain is one
nobody's
of my
ever pulled bigger G's than this guy here based off what happened.
He got so much hate last week, and like, gosh, he got so much hate for his move at Talledega, and everyone in the field is making that move. Like, yeah. I don't understand why. It's just because it was Ross Chastain making that move. If Denny Hamlin was making that move, it's such a great move. But
exactly,
Ross Chastain makes it. Watch the replay. Noah gets so loose on a push, and like he just leaves that open. So
I was going to say, part of that is he had a rookie in front of him, Noah Gragson, who just closed the door late. I think if it's a more experienced driver, maybe it doesn't turn into a wreck. Maybe that other driver realizes what's happening. Yeah. So a lot of that is on Gragson for me there. But pulling G's, Ross Chastain, give it to us.
Yeah, I mean, ranked first in green flag speed at Dover last year. I mean, arguably the best car at Dover last year. I mean, it obviously showed in green flag speed. He had the second best driver rating behind Chase Elliott. His pit crew continues to make up spots on pit road. And I mean, he continues to be really good at steep tracks. I mean, if we think back to how good he was at Bristol and Darlington when he was getting his chances to prove himself, I expect Chevy to be strong, and I think Chastain at 14-1 is just, I mean, solid value. Like, we're not getting much value on the Chevy camp. I mean, the books have definitely caught up to Chevys being strong. And I mean, we're looking at the top 3 odds, right? Larson, Byron, Chase Elliott. So getting some plus money on a good Chevy driver on a good racetrack for this driver, I think is something that we can look at here early in the week.
Yeah, I agree with you. And so as a result, I'm actually gonna to tell you here on this turn 3 pick. I am leaning towards taking Ross Chastain. And again, shop around. It always depends on the state you're in, what you have available to you. But I do have a 15-1 available to me here in Nevada. And my model overall is super in line with the market this week. So you're gonna hear from me a lot of lean, which sucks for creating content like this podcast. I'm leaning this, I'm leaning that, but I'm not gonna sit here and bet 0.25% edges, 0.5% edges, because it very easily could be that my model is 0.5% high or 0.5% low. So you have to always think about the error bars on your models as well. So I like to at least have enough of an edge where I know even with the error bars, I'm still showing value. So I'm going to lean Ross Chastain here at 15-1. I'm going to tell you everything you just said. My model has 6.5% for him to win this race, versus at 15-1 is 6.25%. At 14-1 is 6.6%. 6 2/3%. So it's just a lean for me here. But I got to go along with everything you said. I had a bet on him last year to win this race. And I remember, if he didn't have that trouble getting around Truex, he could have potentially caught Stenhouse, who was in second place. Ricky Stenhouse Jr. finished second last year. And then I think he could have had a chance to maybe give Chase Elliott a run for his money, but it was very tough battling Martin Truex Jr. there. Some really good racing there. So I'm going to go lean with you here on Ross Chastain for turn 3. All right, Stevie, what do you have for us in turn 4?
You mentioned Stenhouse, man. I was hoping that we would get some better odds on him this week because he really was like a top 6 car here. He just didn't finish like 6, like he actually had that type of car. But my turn 4 pick this week, I'm going to go to the Chevy camp again. And I'm going to go Kyle Busch as the top Chevy, plus 850. I'm going to do a half a unit on this one. Also have a bet on Kyle to win the race as well, just for full transparency. I like Kyle Busch a lot this week. I mean, he's one of the best cars at Dover last year, if not the best car. If he didn't have some pit road issues and, I mean, pitting when maybe he shouldn't have pitted, he got put back. I think it was like 16th or 17th, stuck in traffic after that. And just wasn't able to run back up towards the front. And I guess, that was a Toyota. I don't know if it's a downgrade. I mean, Chevy's been so good this year. If it gets rained out on Saturday, Kyle Busch gets the pole. And I'm going to tell you right now, we're not getting Kyle Busch at plus 850 as top Chevy or 22, 20, 23. Like the line is everywhere right now for him to win the race too. So we're not getting any of that if he's starting on the pole. So he's great at steep concrete tracks. I mean, he has a wall of Bristol trophies at his house. With the love that I have for like Chastain and Larson and Byron, this is kind of just a hedge off of my own love of those guys and getting Kyle Busch as the top Chevy. And like I said, for full transparency, I have Kyle to win this race as well.
Yeah, I like the strategy there, as kind of a hedge off of those other guys that you mentioned, because it gives you another avenue to a profitable day for me. And Stevie, we agree a lot, but I'm going to disagree here just because that's what my model says. And it's not because I don't like Kyle Busch here. I actually think he's very good, but my model for some reason has him at 4.1% to win. So even at 23-1, which again is available to me here in Nevada and in some other states, you can find 23-1 on Kyle Busch to win. I'm still not showing value because that's 4.2% implied, and I have 4.1% for him to win. So I'm staying off the Kyle Busch train. I'll probably end up being wrong. I know some others are on the Kyle Busch train. Greg Mathern of Garage Guys and Daily Downforce is there with you. But then I've also seen some other models that are in my range, 4.4%, 4.5% on Kyle Busch to win. So a lot of divide in the betting community on Kyle Busch this week. I think it's going to be an interesting one to watch this weekend for sure. For my turn for pick, I'm going to go with one of the guys we mentioned, one of the guys we've been talking about, the race favorite, Kyle Larson. But I'm going to go in a head-to-head over his teammate, William Byron, at minus 121. This is super thin value for me. So again, just another lean here. So not an official pick, but a lean for me. I have minus 124 as fair value in this matchup, so getting 3 cents of value. But we can't ignore, I should say, Larson's utter just dominance here. He has led over 130 laps in 4 of the last 8 Dover races, half of them. And 3 of them were in the Chip Ganassi car, which isn't as good as the Hendrick equipment that he's in now. So 3 of the 6 Ganassi races he ran in those last 8, and then 1 of the 2 Hendrick races. So 50% with both teams in terms of leading at least 130 laps at Dover. In those 8 races that I just mentioned, he finished top 6 in 6 of them. So he's always running towards the front. That includes a win, and that includes 3 additional podium finishes. So a couple second places and a third place finish as well. So that's, a podium finish half the time, 4 of the 8. So while Byron has been very good at Dover, he's got a couple, I think a 4th place finish, I think 2 4th place finishes in his career at Dover. He has not been super dominant. He's only led 28 laps in his career here, and he has just 2 top 5s, those 2 top 5s that I mentioned, in 8 starts. So while both are performing great this year, I think you got to give the nod to Kyle Larson by a little bit bigger than minus 121.
Yeah, I mean, this is tough for me because William Byron's just been so good this year. And it feels like we've seen these 2 cars just kind of battle it out for wins all year, and now we're throwing Chase Elliott back into the mix. I think this is going to be a tough track. We didn't really talk about it, but I think this is going to be a tough track with like how physical this racetrack is for Chase Elliott. I mean, not only is he like 6 weeks not in a race car and he's run a couple weeks now, but like 6 weeks with no working out either. I mean, he was kind of rehabbing a leg. So this is a very demanding racetrack. So, I mean, kind of one of the reasons that I'm like on the Chevy camp and like Larson and Byron in that camp is because I don't know. It's such a good track for Chase Elliott, but I don't know if I trust the leg fully. So I think this one's really close. I could see it going either way, but I mean, this is definitely, if we're looking at just Dover history, Larson should beat Byron here. And if they're going to have similar type of speed, give me Larson with his track history over Byron here.
Yeah, for sure. And again, this is just another one of those like leans. I mentioned I have it at minus 124. It's minus 121. I mentioned I have, Kyle Busch 4.1%, and you can get 4.2% implied. Same with Chastain, like 6.5 versus 6.25. My model is just spot on with the market this week, which again sucks for content, but that's where it is for me right now. But that completes our lap around Dover Motor Speedway. Kyle Larson took us through turn 4. I think he's taking us into victory lane too, right, Stevie?
Yeah, we gotta go with the favorite here. Both of our models kind of line up as Larson being the favorite. Shout out to BetMGM plus 550. I mean, this is one of those ones, if you really wanted to wait and see if practice and qualifying gets rained out, you could, because I don't know if he gets any like closer. Unless he qualifies on the pole, he might get down to like 4-1, but I think like 550 is going to be kind of the base number here. I mean, 5-1 on some books, so potentially jump on this one early, but this might be one that you wait, and if qualifying gets rained out, it moves to like 8-1, 9-1. I still think he's going to be up towards the top because of just how good he is at this racetrack. So it's hard not to have interest in Kyle Larson. I mean, a guy that's just 5 top 5s in the last 8 finishes. If we look at the last 4 races here, he's finished inside the top 3 in 3 of those 4 races. Like, he's really good here, as good as Hendrick has been this season. I mean, outside of some bad luck last year, spinning out, losing some track position, and just kind of having a rough day, he was still really fast. So we're on board on the Kyle Larson train this week.
Yeah, we definitely are. And everything I said earlier about Kyle Larson, that's where it is. And so my model has Kyle Larson over 18% to win now that I've updated it for no Alex Bowman, and shout out to Alex Bowman. We hope he gets better. Injured in a sprint car accident earlier this week, broke a vertebrae in his back, should be out 3 to 4 weeks. Josh Berry is going to be replacing him. But after updating my model for that news, Kyle Larson is over 18% to win for me. So, you mentioned shout out to BetMGM for having the best line. That is a 15.4% implied odds at plus 550. So I'm still showing a solid 2.5%, 3% of value. I wrote in my article BetMGM had him at 6-1 this morning. He's down to plus 550. That I was waiting for qualifying, practice and qualifying, et cetera, to see if it's going to get rained out, because he will, like you said, start in that 18, 19, 20 range. It depends on how that all shakes out with the Alex Bowman news. So he could lengthen back up to 6-1. And if so, I would definitely bet him if he's still 6-1 after the lineup is set. But yeah, that is going to do it for this edition, the Dover Motor Speedway episode of Running Hot, Action Network's motorsports betting podcast. We'll be back this time next week to talk about bets for the Advent Health 400 at Kansas Speedway. On behalf of my co-host, Stephen Young, thanks again for listening, and we'll see you back here next week on Running Hot from Action Network.